Hello, this is the Torg Eternity Delphi Council debriefing where the storm has a name. If you're watching, this is my cat Mars, who is demanding attention while I'm trying to record this pre-intro. But if you haven't listened to the previous episode, I highly suggest you do that, as this episode is a part 2. We're talking about acts and scenes, both for game masters and for players, how you can break them down, make them easily digestible, and make them very fun for both you as a game master and for you as a player. So hopefully you enjoy watching and or listening. So thank you very much. But let's get into the act structure now, and then after that, we'll get into players and how players might wish to think about it more, for lack of a better word, game mystically, when you're counting resources and things, which I know a lot of players will do. But we've talked about the scenes, the beats. So now let's go up a level and talk about an act. So, Jay, what would your game master advice be for acts?
So the acts are kind of the more broad strokes of what's going on in the adventure. I would say, like advice-wise, you want it to be obvious what the act is about. We did talk about it a little bit with Fires of Ra, in that there are some acts in that adventure which could be taken out of that adventure. They're still good at acts. They're good, like they're actually like a good story and everything, but they do kind of muddle the waters a little bit. Know your players' attention span, because I've had some adventures where after a few acts, they're like, what are we doing again? So it's good to make sure that all of the acts are pretty clear as to what you're doing and how they affect the overall plot of the adventure.
Mm-hmm.
So in the example that I was just making up on the fly of taking out this demon prince. So why are we here taking out this demon prince in this act? That's just step one of what we're trying to do. So maybe we're actually trying to enter into the political games with all the demon lords, and this was just sort of the first step to get us noticed or something like that. Make sure not only the players, but the characters, unless they're being scammed or something, but make sure they know what's going on. And then, as Mark said, each scene should support everything, and it should move its way to a reasonable conclusion. And that is kind of one of the big things, is that the act needs to have a effective conclusion. It's not necessarily like they got off the train and they're here and now it's a new act. Like, something needs to have happened. They need to have made some kind of appreciable change in the campaign. Now, a lot of people also treat an act as the equivalent of a game session, depending on how long your game sessions are. My group tends to actually, because we've got a bunch of dads with kids in sports and stuff, so our game sessions tend to only be 3 hours, so they're not as long as they might be. So we usually kind of do 2 sessions per act.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people will just stop. So that helps reinforce the mechanical ramifications of acts, because, okay, we're done. When we start up the next session, you've got all new possibilities. You've got an all new destiny hand. You've got an all new Cosm card, fresh slate. The key is you do have to remember, if you're not doing a new session, if you ended the act and you start a new act mid-session, don't forget, you still wipe everything. New possibilities, new cards, almost always fully healed as well. There's a few minor exceptions I've seen for not getting fully healed, but usually you want that too. And access to getting back your stuff too. Like, if you had a perk armor or something that got lost, you should probably get it back between acts, unless it's directly going from one thing to another and there hasn't been time. And that's a choice you have to make as a GM, if you want to do that. But getting Cosm cards is probably one of the most significant parts of starting a new act. And we spoke a little bit, Mark and I kind of almost had opposite sort of claims about what would happen if you have too many scenes, because it's true, if you have a lot of scenes and there's a lot of conflict and you're rolling a lot of dice, then that could potentially suck up a lot of possibilities and resources. But on the other hand, if you're going through a lot of combats or a lot of initiative, like dramatic, not dramatic, but combats or dramatic skill resolutions or something, that gives you also the ability to sculpt your hand over time. And then by the time you get to the final scene, people have got these god tier Hands of Destiny cards that they just slam down. So there's a delicate balance of how much you let people do that. And I think a lot of it also comes down to how willing your players are to engage with their Cosm cards, which I think we're going to discuss later. So I could kind of leave it at that.
Always play the Cosm. Always.
Every time.
Every time. I don't care how bad it is. Just embrace it.
So, having got your stuff again, sorry, Mark, I'll pause to add some mechanics. So, at the beginning of an act, as Jay said, everything starts new. So if you had saved up 9 possibilities and you get to the end of the act, you go back down to 3. If you have 0 possibilities, then you have 3. Basically, everything resets, or whatever your base is. I'm going off of the default number, not the I bought a perk so I get a change to the number. So I'm just talking default. And then you, at the end of an act, all the Destiny cards that you've either used in the discard pile or that you've been hoarding to get your god tier hand of Destiny cards, those get thrown in. Everything gets reshuffled, divvied out again. You replenish your Cosm card, etc. So everything starts fresh. During the scenes, that's where you're either going to be spending your Cosm cards or using your Cosm cards to get more possibilities, like we've talked about, that you should, or you're going to have the players who are too afraid to do it, and then they're not going to have a bunch of possibilities at the end of the scene, and then they're going to get new cards anyway. So you're either going to gain a card or you're going to get a new card that you're not going to use because you're afraid to use your cards. But every act does refresh that. Now, I have it. I have little Ziploc baggies that all my players will put their cards in, so that if we don't break, everybody starts off, and I then have my drama deck split into the have used and not used. So basically everything kind of stays as if everybody had stood up and left the table, and then the next time we sit down, we're using the exact same cards and the exact same possibilities, etc. On virtual tabletops, that's really easy to just leave things there. You don't have to save it. But if you are going to have things where it's a little more difficult, or you're not as organized, or your players don't care as much, then you start a new session and you can have that kind of mixed. I also have a very solid 2 sessions to get through a Mega Adventure Act, because they normally are the more scenes, the 5 scenes, whereas the Delphi missions tend to maybe have 3 or less. So those you could probably get through. So that's something to think about. So now I'll after having explained the actual replenishment, what happens, how things refresh, how they restart on acts, Mark, let's do your act structure.
So this is why I like the outline approach to writing whatever mission you're sending your Storm Knights on, because you just hit your headbangers on the outline as far as the acts are concerned, which moves you from where do we start to where do we end, which is whatever the mission's goal is, concludes down there in that last act. In an individual act, you have all of these scenes that are set up there that move forward from that one point, and if you've written it down and you know what your next act is, you know where you're trying to get to, and so you can put together logical story beats, as Jay called them, from where you are at the beginning of the scene to where you want to be at the end of the scene, and the things that you need to include in your scenes will become logically apparent. Like if you're in if you're in the cyber papacy, but you want to be in the living land for the next act, you have to figure out how your storm knights, or you have to give options to your storm knights through the mission, through the scenes, to go from cyber papacy to living land. I mean, you don't have to. In Jay's approach, you just sit back and say, okay, well, you've just discovered that you need to be over here. How do you get there? And then somebody's going to come up, drop a contact card or come up with this or steal a plane or whatever, and off they go. And then you just have to on the fly come up with it, which is fine too. But generally speaking, I think that the acts, it's not a hard and fast rule, but it's a pretty general rule that you're going to have one dramatic scene in an act. And so you get to figure out, this is where I think I look at my storyline, and the stepping stones that form your scenes to go from the beginning of the act to the end. You can kind of look at it and go, oh, that's my dramatic scene right there. Or you can, as the GM, put yourself in the player's seat and say, what would I enjoy being the really cool dramatic scene? That's your dramatic scene. And so now you label that and you can write it up. I know Leamon hates chases, and so he doesn't put them in very often. But it's typical to have a chase in there or not. But if you want to throw in a couple of them because it makes sense, which I do, I'll throw in one or two chases just because they make sense, and they can happen really quickly too. That's fine, but you don't want to get like of your 5 scenes, 4 are chases with one dramatic DSR at the end. I mean, you haven't done it before, so maybe you try it and see what you like.
Just the cannonball run.
There you go, cannonball run. That's the name of the mission. But that's the other thing is, don't become a creature of formula to the point where old Living Greyhawk, as a living campaign for 3rd edition D&D, you knew you had 3 fights. And typically the last fight was the big fight. And so you saved all of your expendable resources waiting for, okay, we're only in the second fight. Don't get carried away. We just need to get through this and to get to the big one. Okay, now we're going to use all of our one-time use things. And it kind of got formulaic. And we started throwing in some stuff at the first one was the big one. And then it kind of went downhill from there in a couple of places. Don't become a creature of habit and become predictable with the way you set up your acts, because your players will drop into habit and they'll start doing it, and you'll wonder, well, this should have been a challenge and it wasn't. Why wasn't it? Because they knew it was coming and they hoarded their resources and they used it only when they need, which is fine. We'll get to the player side of this in a little bit on how you do that, because you want to do that as a player, but as a GM, you want to kind of sneak it in there so that it doesn't, the dramatic stuff should be challenging. It should be. It shouldn't be just a hand wave. So break the rules so that you catch them off guard, because that's what keeps it interesting. But again, every scene needs to reinforce the point of your act, and you need to build them so that each one is a logical step from one logical point, advancing your story to the next, which is where you need to be to start the next act. And so if you figure out where you're going to start the next act and where you are starting this act, the way you get from one to the other should become fairly evident. Let's see. Well, yeah, I think that's you got all the logistical stuff for the act, so I'll leave that alone.
So yeah, I absolutely agree that there should, as Jay said, there should be some resolution at the end of the act. It shouldn't leave.
Yes.
It shouldn't leave what all the scenes were leading up to empty. There should be a goal that was achieved.
A payoff.
And like the Delphi missions, a lot of those are just one act, so that's an entire adventure. So the entire adventure meets the conclusions, or is something. But then you have the mega adventures, which might have an overall where the acts are kind of like steps as well. Although there are the fillers that we've talked about, and fillers not bad. It's just they don't have a direct consequence to the mega adventure. They were just highlighting something about the realm. But the acts themselves, at the end of an act or somewhere in the act, the the point of the act should be achieved, whether that
By
has,
the end of the act.
right, as whether that is gaining the MacGuffin, finding out something that's absolutely needed to know to, okay, this is what, like, um, uh, without breaking any spoilers or anything, we were sent to find this group because this group had something. Well, the end of the act is you've found that information, and then you use that information to get to the next act. But you kind of achieved your goal in finding the what happened. So everything that has been building up, if you do not get that, you're just going to frustrate players because they're going to feel, as Jay said, sometimes when you have even the filler acts within a scene, at some point they're going to be like, what was the point again? Where did we?
Yeah.
You know, within an act, every scene, the player should know what the goal for the act is, or. And it doesn't have to be, we know that the Guffin's name is the statue of Lanala. You just know.
And not just because they got a briefing saying this is your goal. Too.
Right. It could be why the thing could be, why is the bad guy, why is Dr. Mobius have these stormtroopers in the middle of Tharkold? That could be the thing. And at the end of that act, you should find something that is about what that goal was. You know, we got a thing that they had, but now it's encrypted. So that might lead to the next act of we need to find the place to get it decrypted, but they've accomplished their goal of the act of getting the thing. And you know, another one might go further. So I just really feel that players would be bummed if they're just going through scenes and then there's no resolution. Hey, act's done. Huh? What did we do? I don't know.
Keep in mind, in your why are Mobius the shock troopers over here, that just discovering that you can end an act there, but you could also do it because it's like you got front loaded down to a lower end, or you've got ramping up to the dramatic, but you've also got a bell curve where the dramatic is in the middle.
Right.
Like we've gone in, we found out why, but we can't tell anybody because we're in the middle of the living land and our radios don't work. So now we have to get out to tell people and warn them about what's coming. So the end of the act isn't necessarily discovering why they're there. It's successfully getting away with that information. And so that's your whole act, is getting in, finding it, and getting back out again. And there's a lot of ways to skin that cat, right? You can do that in a lot of different ways. But as everybody has said, everything needs to be why I should know why I'm here. I should know why this is supporting what we came here to do, and I should know where I'm going from here. So, yeah.
I might even take it a step further and say that it's important that the players get resolution at the end of the act, not necessarily the characters.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So they might fail at what they were doing because of some Mobius shenanigans or something, but then the players should realize like that's what happened and make them want to go further, right?
And Rod says that's my problem with the Nile Empire, is I always like to let the bad guy get away. And
they don't want to always do it.
No, you don't want to always do it, but it is the Nile Empire, and that's how they become reoccurring villains, right? But that the characters didn't catch the bad guy, but the players got resolution.
Yeah,
right. And
exactly.
It's the I'm gonna, if I try to quote it, I'm gonna horribly misquote it, but it is the
go for it.
The Indiana Jones where he's gotten the idol and he's, you know, he accomplished the goal and then he has to get out and he gets out successfully, but then the other guy's standing there with all of his, you know, buddies, and they're like, okay, whatever you have is going to be mine, and he ends up with the idol. That can happen. The characters didn't get the idol, but didn't keep it, but the players understood and got the idol and then that can lead to the next thing, which might be getting
was
it.
A chase.
It
was a
It was a
chase.
chase.
It's true.
There's
a chase and a
type of
DSR
thing,
to start a plane.
Yeah.
That's right. It was a chase. And snakes. Why is it always snakes?
So very, very good point, Mark. The majority of acts will have the dramatic scene at the end, but you don't have to. And it could definitely be in the middle or the scene before you have your dramatic encounter, and then getting out is another few.
Or whenever a
steps.
techno demon shows up.
Or whenever, and then you have a short little dramatic scene going on. But it doesn't always have to be at the end. Mixing it up also will help prevent, as what you said, Mark, of the players fine-tuning the way that they spend possibilities and cards and get everything together because they know certain things are coming, and then the game master can switch things up for the act. The other thing I did want to point out or clarify is when I said a fight, the fight doesn't, while Torg is very action orientated, and a lot of the times it will be physical fights, violent fights. The fights could be other things that are conflicts that include flipping rounds and drama cards or stuff. We've brought things like debates, and you can have, trying not to give away too many spoilers, but there can be social events.
Dance-offs.
Yes, dance-offs, social events, trying to win favor to a lord
Uprooting Stella.
or uprooting. Yeah, there can be many different things than just fist fights and shoot 'em up. As when I said fights is the category.
Anything that causes rounds.
Right. Just something that is conflict with an opposing side. So now let's use the last little bit to talk about player side of things. A lot of players who have been doing Torg for a long time have certain ways that help them, and it's not a bad thing to game the rules. Isn't necessarily a bad thing, because when you have a limited amount of time and resources and things, sometimes knowing when to use certain things helps out, and otherwise you feel like I never want my players to feel like it's work. I want it to feel like it's fun, or they're like, man, we're always losing, and I hate this game because we always end up not doing this thing or sucking in this thing, and it's like, well, if you understood a few things, then you could be able to handle those situations better. So let's talk about resources, how players might wish to think about using resources for themselves individually and as a group in general. So I'm going to flip things over, Mark, and I'm going to hit you first this time. So what would some tips and tricks for player resource management within scenes and within acts to help the player and help the group accomplish these beats and goals that we've talked about on the Game Master side?
Well, I think the number one thing that players as a group need to be cognizant of is that the cards you hold in your hand are not your cards. They are our cards. The table has a set of cards. You happen to have 4 of them in your hand, or 5 if you're under glory or whatever. But if your fellow Storm Knight across the table really, really needs a card that you have, do not be afraid to trade that card away. Even though you're like, this is a really good card. I might want the opponent fails if somebody's coming after me. But Bob over there is about to get his head taken off if we don't cause this attack that just really exploded all over the place fail. And so give it to Bob, because if you're free with your resources that way, they will be free with their resources towards you when you need them too. This is what makes This is the number one thing to me that separates veteran player tables from newer player tables is they're not afraid to trade cards back and forth. It's a free resource among people when they can. And don't be afraid to ask, hey, does anybody have a basic bonus? Oh, I really need a hero card. Does somebody have a hero? And don't be afraid, like I got to give them something that's just as valuable. It's a nice thing to do, but I wouldn't be hung up on the idea of I'm sorry, I got to give you a crap card. It's all I got. But I really need this hero.
Because you can trade that crap card in the future for another better
Yeah,
card if needed.
because it's not your cards, it's our cards, and if everybody's on that same page, then you have an absolutely powerful tool in Torg to be able to succeed at whatever you want to do. And that's because, in my opinion, Torg favors the players, because it's the way the game's designed, and that's fine. It also favors metagaming. It doesn't just discourage. It doesn't discourage metagame. It encourages it. So from GM's standpoint, as a GM, if your player says, "Well, how far off from a success am I?" Tell them. What's the difficult? I mean, unless they're extenuating circumstances like we had in Operation Soft Cell, where Rod started the game with, normally I would tell you, but there are going to be reasons at some points that you're just not going to know. Okay. Normally in Torg, you know what your DNs are. If you want to know how far am I off from a good success, tell them, because if a lot of times cool information is hidden behind the good and the outstanding, and players want to make the decision about whether or not they want to go. And I often will ask Rod or whoever's running, do I care about levels of success?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if all you want to do is I just need to see them succeed at a DN10, and then we give them the piece of information or they get what they need, and I don't really have anything set up for good or outstanding, then say no, so they don't burn resources that they're not going to get anything for. And players, don't be afraid to ask. You should be, that it's a thing, and don't anybody have a basic bonus? Do I want to be outstanding? Do we as a table think I should go for outstanding? Table says yes, spend the possibility, spend the hero card, whatever, and try, because everybody at the table said, yeah, we think we really want to know. When you're playing in the scenes, as I don't know if it was Jay or Leamon pointed out, or both, the approved action is how you get more cards. So if you're sitting there and you're like, I wish I had more cards, look at what the approved action is. Take a flyer on it. Try. If you got no shot, you got no shot. So don't do that. But if trick is the approved action and your trick is an 8, pick a target on the table that has a low trick, because you should be able to ask your GM, hey, what's the trick? Rod will post the defenses of a threat. If you're playing virtual tabletop, you can open that up and you can see them. And you can make a decision. It speeds gameplay for GMs. It speeds gameplay if you post that information, or if you're freely, hey, what's the trick on this? He's a 7. Okay, let me get back with Lisa over here. And now you've told, now I can think about it. Trick I'm not fighting the big bad, but I'm getting a card, which may help. You might get the card that somebody needs to do what you need to do that's successful. So know what I would tell players, always have one primary interaction attack that you're really good at. Put points in it to be good at it, because sometimes you won't be able to do the thing you're good at, but if you can use your interaction attack, you can gain cards and put conditions on the bad guy. So it's helpful as a player to always have at least one interaction attack that you're really good at. I would have 2, one that you're really good at and a backup that you're kind of good at, like an 8 or a 9, that you got a good shot at being successful, so you can get cards and put conditions on the bad guy when you can't be productive in another way. This is very important. Then it's going to sound like yeah, duh, but people forget it. You must have a possibility to soak. If you don't have a possibility, you can't soak, and you could die. So when you are looking at your possibilities, trying to decide whether or not you want to succeed at that trick really bad, and the big bad's kind of eyeballing you with his god meter, getting ready to blast your head off. Do you want to spend your last possibility on the trick, or would you rather kind of hang on to that just in case you got to soak 3 wounds? I contend you need to hero card in your pool, drama card in your pool, possibility in your hand, something, because that's how people die, is they forget about that last possibility and they can't soak without it. And that segues into, do you really need to succeed at that persuasion roll? You want to. We always want to succeed, but do you really need to? And like, do I want levels of success? No, you just need a 10. And I'm stuck on a 6. Do I really need to? Can somebody else do the roll and succeed? And then, I'm sitting here with, I didn't spend any of my resources on it. We still got what we needed. I didn't get to succeed. Somebody else did. So ask yourself if you really need to succeed before you start piling your resources on it. And then you discover that all you got out of it was that the guy is around the corner. Right? I mean, okay, I spent a possibility, a drama, and 3 and a supporter card. Somebody spent a supporter card on it, and all we got was a 10 to get around the corner. Okay, whatever.
Okay, Jay, we'll switch over to you for player tips.
Okay, so the big one that you covered was approved actions. So yeah, that's the main way of getting more, and experienced players will basically throw an approved action every turn. It's a -2 to multi-action. Unless you're really bad at what you're already doing, there's almost no reason not to try to do the approved action unless it's defend, or it's intimidate versus undead or something like that, right?
Something that won't work.
Yeah, it's almost always worth doing, because that's how you gain more and more and more cards, and then you're able to do that hand sculpting that we talked about. And the main reason why people like to do hand sculpting, and in fact, it starts as soon as you begin the act. Once everyone gets their cards, it's like, okay, who's got a glory? Anyone got a glory? Who's got hero? Who's got drama? Let's trade those around so they're not all in one hand. Okay, so that's like what Mark was saying. I've even posted on the Discord a few times a meme of like, a communist Bugs Bunny saying our Destiny cards. But so make sure that they're spread about and able to be used appropriately. Make sure the characters that are going to be doing like willpower or spells have like the willpower cards, and so it's worth doing that at the very beginning. So after that, don't waste your second chance cards. It's one of the only things that can stop you from a disconnection. Or a really bad, sometimes, a mishap on a soak is the main one. So I've seen players spend them on silly things, just like, it's like it can go so bad for you. Recognize the power of Seize Initiative. That is probably one of the best cards. Doubly so if you're in a chase or DSR. You can really change things up, but usually either by getting rid of just bad initiative results or looking for better approved actions. There's so many things that Seize Initiative can do. This is probably like a hot take. I don't know if it's a hot take or not, but personally, I generally would rate hero and drama cards over possibilities. If I had hero in my hand and I had possibilities, I would spend the possibility instead. And this goes to sort of the next overall thing, which we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, which is Cosm cards. Now, we did a lot of reviews on Cosm cards, and not all Cosm cards are created equal, as we discussed.
Fair.
But a lot of Cosm cards are able to give you significant amounts of possibilities, especially in Urorsh. But a lot of players, as Leamon mentioned earlier, are scared of possibilities. And my home group is not of possibilities, of Cosm cards.
Cards.
My players at home are not. They love Cosm cards, and they especially love the ones that screw each other over, and they play them all the time. But because of that, we would end sessions with people having 9 possibilities, like Leamon said. Like, it happens. And it gets to a point where, like, it's like having potions in Skyrim. It's like, I don't want to drink it, and then you end the campaign, you've got 6,000 potions. There's no point. So spend them freely, but spend them wisely, like Mark said. Make sure you got one to soak at least, right? However, hero cards and drama cards are what you need to juice those glories. So those you want to kind of keep in reserve unless you really need to use them. Unless, of course, someone's got a backup. What's it called again? The Destiny card lets you pick it back up.
Oh, Master Plan.
Master Plan.
Yeah, okay. Unless you got one of those, then okay, you can use it a bit. But yeah, knowing how to use your possibilities is probably one of the most important player skills. And a lot of it comes from what Mark said earlier about knowing when it's worth even trying to boost. It's like, okay, I failed. Can I even succeed if I boost with this?
Yeah,
like, what do I need to roll to actually do it? Is it worth spending the possibility to do this? Not always, but sometimes it will be. So it depends on how many possibilities you can garner, especially if your GM is one of those ones that gives away possibilities for good role play or telling a funny story or whatever. I used to do that, but I stopped just because they were swimming in possibilities already.
I don't either.
So, but if it's a beginner group, that's usually good. And I will say, like, it sounds, I don't know, this might sound sort of like, I don't know, almost condescending in some ways, but when I first started running some games on Torganized Play, because these are just random people that have come together as opposed to like a well-honed group that have been playing for a long time, it was night and day compared to what my home group would do. Like, the efficiency of card play was not there unless there was one of those core Earth characters that cycles, because when someone's playing one of those guys, they always know the score. But you can really see it. The card play and managing possibilities is really the strength of your Torg character. Not so, I mean, good stats are good. They're, it's good to have high numbers, but the card play and the possibilities can get you out of almost anything. And I think it was in the playtesting Discord long ago that someone, it might have even been Leamon, and I can't remember who said it. Someone said that Torg is not about whether you succeed or fail. It's about how much are you willing to spend to succeed. Because you can almost always be guaranteed to succeed at what you're doing. It's just a question of how many resources do you want to spend.
Right, and is it worth spending them?
Is it worth it? Yeah.
So, no, I agree with all of that. Really, I hope if you haven't listened to those, go back, listen to our Cosm cards. We went through all the different Cosm cards for all the different realities. Don't be afraid, because that's how you're going to... And as Mark said, these are our resources as a group. So as a player, try not to think of, in order to do this, like, okay, if I trigger a dino attack, then we're going to fight, and I'm going to have to spend, because I'm not a great fighter, I'm going to have to spend a couple of possibilities. If everybody gains possibilities and you don't, the whole party has gained a lot more possibilities as a whole. As Jay said, also, the hero and the drama card are important because they're cards that can be traded. And I know a lot of people don't like the transfer card for the Destiny card, but that's a way to transfer. If I have 9 possibilities because my dice have been really nice to me, and Joe to my left has 1 possibility, I'm going to use that transfer card. I don't need 9. It's because then I'm just, again, you want to succeed for everything you do, but you don't have to succeed. If I don't hit him this round, I can hit him next round, or I can do this other thing. So evening out the possibilities across, use those transfer cards. I will say the biggest trick that a player group can do is get an Inspire in both master plans and play the Inspire, play the master plan, play the Inspire, play the master plan, play the Inspire. Everybody gets 3 possibilities. Unless you have a person for some reason that's going to fall unconscious, you're not usually going to take the shock, the heal some shock, and unless you don't have any cards, you're not going to take the Destiny card. I have done that a couple of times when I have had like the 6 to 9 possibilities and only had like a card or no cards. But that's going to give your group an entire huge amount of resources. So don't be afraid to play the Inspire. Play them fast, play them early, because those resources are going to last at least for a scene for your and for the whole act.
Right.
If you do it at the act and you get the possibility, that could carry on.
Better to play it before you're in scenes and have to pool it.
Right.
And that
real quick, also for Jay's spread them around at the beginning. That's also good because if I have 4 really good cards, it's going to take me 4 rounds to get all of those into my pool and be able to play all of those. If we take those and those get circulated, then everybody, if you have 4 people and those are the 4 great cards and you give 1 of those to each person, then everybody gets those down into the pool the first round, and then you can trade those as needed. Now, yes, that will occasionally backfire on you when the villain has some power that allows them to make everybody lose a card from their pool, but that's a rare thing, and your statistics are better if you just get those all out to begin with. So were you going to add something?
Yeah,
Jay, Mark?
On the card play, you got like some cards like Martyr. I understand the Martyr card. I don't think I've ever played it just because I like my characters and I don't want to lose my characters. But the Martyr card has a nice bit on it, and we've talked about this when we went through it, where if you don't want to play it, you can turn it in, get a possibility, get another card. The problem is, and I've enforced this all the time, and it happens a lot in combat. When, as Leamon said, when combat ends, the scene ends. And when I, as a GM, declare, okay, that's the end of a scene, we're going to reset hands and everything, no more card play is allowed at that point because I've ended the scene. Mm-hmm. And so you can't, I wanted to play the Martyr card. Well, I'm sorry, you can't do that now. That's a card in your hand because I've ended the scene. So if you've got one of those cards, I think Romance does the same thing. You can discard the Romance. Yeah. So, but if you've got one of those cards and you're not going to play it, discard it as soon as you get the opportunity so you can get the possibility in the card, because if your GM, this is one of the times where I don't rule in favor of the players because of the way it's so player oriented. When you get to the end of a scene, now we're doing the card thing. We're going to reset cards or reset hands. We're going to pick all our cards up. We're going to go back up to 4 or get down to 4. And then you can, once everybody's there, now you can throw one out and recycle. And once we're done with that, then you can play the Martyr card. Well, the problem with that now is that you start the next scene 1 card down. Whereas if you had before the other scene ended, you play that card for the possibility, then we end the scene and you start with a full hand. Mm-hmm. That's why it's important that as a player, you recognize, hey, we could be ending a scene soon. I need to get this card out of my hand and get it played so that I can get the possibility for it, so that when I refresh, I go back up, instead of I didn't play it, I've ended the scene, I still want the possibility, so now I've got a dead card in the hand because I already know I'm not going to have it. That's it occurred to me as we were talking about card play.
Right. My player, I have certain players. It's not like my groups. I have certain players that love the Martyr card because they like playing different characters. I will keep it as a make sure the mission succeeds, and I will keep it just and there's been a couple times on the stream where I thought we might not succeed or other people would die and was getting ready to play it. Like that round I was going to play it and then somebody exploded and took out the big guy with, toughness 30. It was able to, finally, okay, now I don't have to play it, but I have been prepared to play. The other thing I wanted to say is if you have the expansion decks, the booster decks, there are like step A, step B, step C, step D. You'll probably want one of those or maybe two, but if you have all of those, you might, talk and have those be a couple of ones that you discard because they can be handy, but usually you don't need all four of them. And if you want to, you can go through the drama deck and determine what the percentages are for each of those letters and figure out these are the two or the one or two letters that least often come up, so that's what we want.
Those are the cards that everyone's like, "Oh, I hate this card. Get rid of it."
Right.
And then later they're like, "Oh my god, why?"
Murphy's Law of Torg.
Right,
whatever
right.
card you just discarded is the one you're going to need.
Right. So there are cards like that, Transfer and Maelstrom and the steps cards that everybody kind of looks at and goes, I don't want this. But there are very, very good cases that those cards come into play. Maelstrom, especially if you have like seize initiatives, you can't spend possibilities, so the enemy can't soak. As Jay said, seize initiative or some perks that do some deck manipulation. If you can go, if you can hurt them, and then you go again, because it lasts until the heroes.
Especially if you flurry.
Right, or you flurry, you can get through that to where you end up where you can soak. You might not be able to after a moment. You might not be able to spend those possibilities to boost your actions, which then you just have to take this round. After this point until it ends, we just might fail, but he's not going to be able to soak. But then you get to the end of your turn, and then you at least can soak. So those cards, don't just look at it and go, this card is completely horrible. There are good uses for a lot of the cards that people don't like, and having those with the transfer, I have a bunch of possibilities. I can transfer, and then at the end of the scene, I'm going to refill my hand anyway, or I'm going to do an improved action. I don't need 6 cards in my hand, that type of thing.
I boated offensively.
Or the drive offensively card. I like to say that can be used with any vehicles for stuff like that. So, having said that, we do thank you for listening. Hopefully, both as players and game masters, you can kind of understand the structure of Torg adventures, the scenes, the acts, how to structure them as a game master, how the resources work, and how as a player you can think about your resources when you go on the adventure and make it easier and more fun for you, because strife and conflict is a central theme to a lot of role-playing games, and very much so in Torg, but you want to be able to win. You will get disheartened if you don't use the full advantage of cards and possibilities and Cosm cards. Destiny cards, Cosm cards, possibilities, and you will just make it more difficult on yourself. So look at all those things. Having said that, please do email us at torgdcd@gmail.com. And until next time, we hope you have fun in your own Cosmverse. Bye.